Hello and welcome to Builders by Proxify, the podcast where we dive deep into the minds of engineers, designers, and innovators shaping the future of technology. I'm Lee Haynes, and today our exciting guest is Jesper Fredriksson, AI engineer lead at Volvo Cars. Volvo Cars is renowned for its commitment to safety, sustainability, and premium user experiences. As Volvo transitions to becoming an all-electric car brand by 2030, AI-driven personalization, automation, and safety systems are redefining the driving experience. Jesper's journey is nothing short of fascinating, starting in brain research, medical imaging, before transitioning into data science and AI. Today, he leads AI initiatives at Volvo Cars, focusing on enhancing the digital experience, leveraging generative AI, and exploring the future of autonomous driving. In today's episode, we'll dive into AI in the automotive, digital transformation, generative AI applications, and the societal impact of intelligent systems. Jesper, a warm welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's going to be interesting.
Yes, indeed. And let's start, shall we, with your journey. So, from brain research to AI in the automotive industry. Give us a little bit of background. Tell us all about it. What came before Volvo Cars?
Yeah, so as you said, I started a long time ago in brain research and was working on first understanding human brains. And my field of expertise was more the analysis of the brains or the brain images. And then moved into looking at aging in the brain and further on looking at the systems that generate those images, so looking at the quality in medical scanners, working at a startup trying to establish a new way of sort of analyzing quality images. And then I moved into data science, worked a little bit at startups around Stockholm, and I ended up at a company called Volvo Car Mobility, a service called Volvo On Demand, which was a car sharing company. It was owned by Volvo Cars, but it was run as a standalone company and as very much like a startup. So, and then 2 years ago, approximately, we transitioned the company Volvo that hosted a service Volvo On Demand into Volvo Cars. So that's when I got into the Volvo Cars, sort of the enterprise version of the company. And it was a bit of a transition to go from a startup to a company with 40,000 plus employees at different places around the world. So that's been interesting, challenging also, and it's had me rethink a lot of how I work, basically. But the main thing about the main plus side for me was that there was a space to start a generative AI team and focus on that area. Whereas in startups, you tend to do all sorts of different things, just focusing mainly on what's good for the customer and how can we bring value out of data. So that's sort of how I got to be here.
Fantastic, and we'll talk a little bit later, I think, about startup experience in the startup versus the kind of enterprise setting. So the transition from brain research into kind of data science and AI was what kind of pushed you into AI, machine learning, and everything?
Yeah, I think actually the start of the reason why I transitioned from medical imaging into data science or big data, as it was called at that time, was the start of the deep learning movement, and suddenly you could analyze images in a totally different way, and you could do so much more. And then there was this fantastic moment. Was it around 2016 somewhere, where AlphaGo, the British startup, then made a computer could face off one of the top Go players in the world. So to me, that was a bit like watching a moon landing, to see the computer play against a top champion. There was that was part of the reason why I moved into this area in the first place. So I'm super happy now that the generative AI came along and moved it into something that's really general purpose.
Mm. And there must be, I can imagine, at least, there must be quite a few similarities between the kind of brain research side of thing and AI in terms of like, analyses and stuff like that. How would you say your background in brain research, neuroscience, then, and imaging influence your approach to AI and machine learning today?
Yeah, I think to be fair, it's a completely different paradigm. There's so much we still don't know about the brain, so it would be taking on too big sort of outfit to say that the brain research has taught me a lot about artificial intelligence, sort of from that respect. But it's fascinating to see what seemed to be something that was purely it was only humans who could do that kind of work, and I did not think it would move this quickly, so that it's possible to do these things, and it made me rethink like what is so special about the human brain anyway, if you can do it with simplistic neurons that and connect between them. So yeah, it's super fascinating. And also,
really fascinating.
Another thing is like this recent thing about chain of thought thinking and the reasoning models. You've tried it out, but you can see that the reasoning traces, which look similar to what you would expect from a human reasoning. So that's also an interesting sort of similarity. You could also go to the transformer architecture, which is, I mean, it has some similarities with how humans think in a way, but it's very simplistic, of course.
Yeah, and without knowing or going into kind of how it's working kind of under the hood, it's fascinating with the most recent models to actually see it reasoning as well. So when you've asked it or when you've prompted, you see these kind of changing text where it's like, the user's asking me this, I need to do this. It's really, really cool. But your role at Volvo Cars, AI engineer lead. So you're leading in AI initiatives focusing on digital experience, right? Can you clarify a little bit, what the role entails? What is it you're doing at Volvo? And
so it's a part of Volvo that's called commercial digital. So we're focusing on the mainly the digital experience of the car. So everything that's not in the car, to simplify it. There are parts could be in the car, but mostly outside the car. So the app, the web, customer service, all those things that are sort of around the digital experience.
Mm-hmm. And how's your team? What is it working on? How is it enhancing the digital ecosystem then? Obviously, rather than the physical construction, right?
Yeah. So it's been a mixture of many different things. The initial focus for my team was to work with internal tools because that's so much easier to do. So we've had a lot of chatbots, things that can automate repetitive tasks, etc. And now we're starting to look into things like getting smart insights from your driving. So how efficiently do you drive? How safely do you drive? And trying to find, can we give something that will enlighten the user about how they use the car and maybe use it in a better way? And try to give something that's interesting enough so that you would come back to it and not just something to stack on just because it's generative AI. But so it's interesting. So, for example, is your fuel consumption on par with other XC60s and this type of driving that you do?
And are there also I can imagine these kind of personalization algorithms, voice assistants, and these features that are kind of connected to the car, of course, that you're working on as well, or?
Yeah, not necessarily if they're in the car. So that's a totally different branch of the company that works with the car. So not so much with that, but that would be super fascinating to think about. What would you do if you rethink the car experience?
Right.
What would you use AI agents for if you're sitting in a car and you want to maybe get food along the way, or what do I know? but that's not primarily within my domain.
So yeah, yours is more the app and
The app
that
and the
side of
web
things, right?
and
Out of the
customer
car.
experience, etc.
Nice. And what's your leadership philosophy when it comes to building and scaling these kind of AI teams? How big is the team that you're leading?
It's a small team. We're just 6-7 people, depending on the day you're asking. And we're focusing on both doing stuff and doing stuff within generative AI and AI at large, but also upskilling the rest of the organization, holding hackathons, all these things that can sort of kickstart a new way of thinking about these new tools. So we're trying out, for example, these hackathons. We're doing something very short at the moment, bi-weekly, every Friday. Bi-weekly, we gather sort of the interesting people and trying to bring out a community of people that can sort of find ways to collaborate across the different teams that we're working regularly. And then we do some bigger hackathons as well.
And that's really cool. I was going to say about fostering kind of a culture of innovation and collaboration. This is one really, really cool way of doing it. So you do it bi-weekly. It's quite a frequent
yes.
cadence in my experience. It's really interesting.
It's proven to be a low cost investment. We're doing it so half a day, so it's not a whole Friday. Then we prepare a lot before it, and I think the beautiful thing is that you choose what you want to work on. So it's you get the freedom to do something that's could be relative to your everyday work, but it could be something new, and you could form relationships with others and try to do things together with people you haven't worked with before. So that kind of working, I think, is a small investment that you can do to kickstart. So if you don't have any generative AI team, that's I think the first thing I would do to get people working with it, because there's so many people that are interested, and especially for developers, it's super simple to just call an API, try things out, and see how it works.
Nice. And as a lead then, and you mentioned the team was kind of 6-7 strong, depending on what day you ask, of course. I'm just interested to hear what skills and qualities you look for when hiring AI engineers, or do you think are kind of you think are super important in this day and age?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a totally new. You could say that it has a lot to do with previous types of roles, but it's a new role. So I think the main quality I'm looking for is somebody who's curious. If we're looking at sort of soft skills and like how you collaborate with people, sort of how you approach problems. But then it's important to have a mixture of different sort of angles into the space. So we have a mix of software engineers, data scientists, and some product people. UX focus, super important. So we learned along the way, and we see, for example, this product angle is something that we realized this work is very similar to regular product work in a product team. So we needed that aspect, and it's good because with generative AI, you could sort of fill those things up by asking an LLM, like, how would you solve this thing? But we ended up doing a lot of that kind of work, so it made sense to bring in people who do that more professionally. But those three angles, I think, are super important to have.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really well put. And what would you say are the biggest challenges that you face in kind of building the team? Or
building the team has been not so hard, I would say. It was a challenge to sort of to get to a point where I know my vision and then communicate that vision. Because it can be a little bit stiff in enterprise companies. So we're sitting under an analytics department, and getting software developers into that is not something that's it's a little bit unknown, so you sort of have to argue for that. And then product people is another thing. To try to get this multidisciplinary approach is a little bit of a challenge, but it's easy to find. I think curious people. Because there's so much of an emphasis from everywhere on generative AI, so that part is relatively easy, I would say.
And what about in terms of trying to make sure the team is or kind of remains agile or adaptable? Because it's obviously, you mentioned it before, there's so much happening at such a fast pace. How do you kind of, what tips and tricks are there for keeping the team agile and adaptable?
I think it goes back to sort of ways of working is one thing, but then I think maybe depending on the type of people, maybe you need to challenge them towards thinking new things, and then these hackathons, for example, is a good thing to sort of foster that kind of thinking. It's easy to get caught up with the everyday activities, so I think it's important to get that sort of space to think a little bit outside the box. I was thinking about something else. Yeah, it could be different if it's problems. Sometimes it's talked about the problem of finding value. Then you need to sort of bring that into the equation. So we had to put up some sort of framework how to think around what are the valuable projects or POCs to take on. How do you prioritize different use cases? So that's also been a bit of a struggle because it's new. It's hard to know how to think about it, and it's easy to. I would say, from my angle, it's easy to think far into the future because I'm so curious about what's going to happen in a couple of years. And it's so obvious to me that this is going to have a huge impact on any company, but I need to get myself to focus to bring it down to what's happening now, and how can we bring value already today. And that's different from company to company. I think what is the priorities? How do you what are your priorities? And you need to anchor that with sort of the top leadership. What do they think is important? If they think that generative AI is something that's crucial to us, then it's easier to get everything to align down to, like, what am I going to do every day? But if the company is, as Volvo is in the middle of several transformations, I mean, the digital transformation, how to approach consumers, if we're going to go direct to consumers or not, electronics in the car, all these things. So if that's the focus, then you can't say generative AI is super important. Let's go all in on that. That's not going to. That sort of takes something from me as well to be realistic.
And talking about generative AI, how's it being used at Volvo Cars, or how are you kind of using it in your team on the kind of the work that you guys are focusing on? Or, like, more to put it another way, what are the most exciting applications that you see for this technology in what you're working on?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of the usual suspects that we go through as well. There's internal productivity is super easy to bring in. Just bringing in something like GitHub Copilot, Cursor, or whatever you want to use. That's something that's been proven throughout the industry that brings a lot of productivity to programmers. And then there are all these everyday tasks, like if you have Notion, make sure that you have Notion AI, etc. So that's on the individual and team productivity levels. And then when it comes to making things within the company, then you can do, for example, chatbots. We experimented with text to SQL, where you can ask a question in natural language, even if you're not technically, if you're just a product person and you want to know something about your feature, then you can work with something that can access databases, and you can converse with them and get people to be more data-driven. So that's one way. And then the next step is customer care. There's a lot of interesting applications that you can do there to enhance the human agents with generative AI in different ways. And we've been working in a completely different way to, for example, Klarna, where they initially said that they would fire all customer support employees and have AI agents do that, and now they've backtracked from that a little bit just recently. So it's interesting to think about how to approach how full on to tackle those problems. So those are some of the problems, and then I mentioned before this thing about having things that go directly to consumer. That's the most difficult thing to work with, because you have to be so much more sure about what you're delivering to the end user.
Yeah,
It takes so much testing.
It's a different animal when it's a kind of obviously the end user in mind here. But you mentioned the kind of natural language to SQL use case here as well, which I think is super interesting. One area that can touch a lot of companies as well. How are you guys working with this? So is this more in regard to, again, user just asks a question in natural language and receives answers, kind of data back, or receives kind of queries back from the
there are many different approaches you can take. So this is something that we started when I was still on this, I mentioned the Volvo On Demand service. So I was working in a data team there, and I could see that there's so many questions coming in from the side that you have to answer. And then that was the start of the generative AI sort of journey for me at Volvo Cars. To just build a Slack bot that can take a question. So you chat in Slack where you usually are. It's super important to have a good vehicle for it. And then you get an answer back, and then you can start experimenting with getting graphics back, or having something like a dashboard of your own. There are many different approaches to it. That's how we started with it. And then when moving into Volvo Cars, we realized that there's so much more varying degrees of data readiness. So it proved to be more challenging than I thought to get that to fly in more departments. Also because of people need to be ready to work in that way. Depends on how to integrate with your daily work, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's key, you touched upon it there, is this kind of data readiness, right? Whether that's labeled data or unlabeled data, as the case may be, and running into kind of obstacles in that sense. I've run into those obstacles myself as well, so I know exactly what you mean. But we touched upon the end user and everything like this, and I'd like to just talk a little bit about like AI-driven personalization and user experience, right? So I would imagine like personalizations are really always becoming more and more this kind of key differentiator in the automotive industry.
Yes.
How is AI enhancing the user experience?
I would say
Volvo Cars.
I would say today we're taking baby steps. So I think we have a long way to go to get it really personalized. And I think this is going to mature a lot over the coming years. I think there's going to be a totally different experience of all digital experiences in a year or two. We're going to start thinking about that. I'm thinking about that now, just to be ready for it. But I think there's so much emphasis today on model capability and doing the work that we do today. But I think it's going to be, in a way, even more exciting when we start to really understand what does it mean for a digital experience when we have these systems and they're so capable, and trying to focus on delivering the experiences to the user. And I think the personalization aspect will be totally key there. I think the companies that can take care of that, can make that into their products as fast as possible and start experimenting with that I think would be a key differentiator. You can just imagine if you rethink the digital experience from the ground up and say, what's it going to be if the software already knows everything about me, and it can provide maybe an interface that looks exactly like I want it to. Do I prefer to interact with audio, or do I prefer to have a regular interface? What's my life like? How do you talk to me? What kind of person am I? But then, of course, we get into how much are we willing to share with the systems, and I think we haven't even started along that journey.
No, exactly, because it's all well and good, the kind of end goal being these enhanced user experiences and everything. But what we're talking about here is ultimately there's that trade-off between, obviously that, but also ensuring data privacy, security, right?
And it's going to be different for different people.
Exactly, and it's a growing focus, right? Especially in Europe. So how is Volvo ensuring user data security, but also trying to work on personalizing these experiences?
Yeah, so from my point of view, it's radically different from what I've seen before, in that we're extremely on the safe side of everything. And I used to personally think before that as long as I have the user's best interest in mind, like after GDPR came along, for me it helped just to think about, okay, I'm not going to be evil here. I'm not going to collect data just because I'm curious about it or the company wants this. Yeah. But if I think along the lines of I'm going to do what's best for the customer, then I'm always on the safe side. But at Volvo, I think we're taking it more of an enterprise approach and trying to adhere to the rules. So that led me to I need to change a little bit how I think about it. But Volvo is extremely, of course, it's part of the brand. So it's something that's it can't be. We can't say I made a mistake and then backtrack from that. So we're on the safe side of everything.
And while on this kind of, you mentioned enterprise there, on this topic, we mentioned earlier as well, like startups versus enterprise or kind of larger companies, and the differences. I'm keen to get your take on key differences in how AI is approached in these settings, startups versus enterprises, in your experience.
Yeah, I think when it comes to AI, it's not so different. I think it's the main difference. I think is that it really needs this buy-in from the top. It needs to align all the way through, because there's so many levels, and people are sort of since you become even more specialized when you're in a larger company, and you can work with only a small piece and stay with that. So you sort of don't think so much about things around, and you get very much into this. This is what I'm solving. So that's why this thing is important, that it's aligned from the top, and it's put emphasis on that. This is something that we need to do. Whereas in a smaller company, you might not have time to focus specifically on generative AI, but it will more be something that grows organically from the bottom up. And since you more or less know everybody in the startup, depending on the phase. I mean, if you're in the scale-up phase, then it could be different. But when you're at the stage where you know everybody in the company, then you can just find, I know everybody who's interested in Gen AI and have this community. So it grows more organically, whereas you have to push things a little bit more in the enterprise world. But people are curious everywhere about this. So I think it's that part is not different. People are still curious and open-minded, but maybe it's a little bit more stiff in how it works in an enterprise company.
And what about the point of like risk tolerance in these two settings? Obviously, we're talking about partly about kind of pace of innovation and stuff like this, which is quite obvious. And I think there's the point of risk tolerance as well. What's your view on that in the settings that you've been in?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, in the startup world, it's. I think risk is viewed completely different. It's something that you need to live with, and you need to embrace the risk. You need to take you need to get it into your mind that I'm going to take a lot of risks, and the main thing is to not fail. I need to fail fast, basically. So that's the mindset in a startup. I'm gonna try all different things and just make sure that I don't end up with a long work that doesn't lead anywhere. So you need to be more strict about these things. Whereas it's hard to get that focus to do or to focus on one thing, as I said before. Whereas you can more focus in an enterprise company where you have a smaller box to work within.
And I mean, well, generative AI and these, intelligent systems, they also kind of raise these societal and also ethical questions as well, right? I'm just interested to hear a little bit about your team's approach to the ethical challenges of AI. I mean, a lot of the systems in the Volvo cars as well, but I can imagine in the kind of out of car user experiences as well. These AIs are kind of enabling or helping make critical decisions, right? So what's your approach to these kind of ethical, societal kind of challenges that come with it?
It is a hard problem, and I think one needs to be. That's an area where you have to be very. What is the word? You have to know that you don't know everything. We don't know how the models are trained. We don't know the biases that are in them. So you have to always have that in the back of your head. For example, if you go to HR and try to implement screening, there could be a lot of hidden biases that you don't want to run unchecked. What we typically do is try to, for every application we make a set of evaluations. And that's often the hardest part of the work. It's something that people don't know. I think when you think about generative AI, you think that you just use the models and you make a system. But the hardest part is it's more like test-driven development, where you need to early on start thinking about what are the tests that I want to make sure that this system can always verify that they can handle or not handle, and you have to be aware of what it's not capable of handling. So it takes a lot of effort to do these evaluations, and always have them every time you commit every time you do something. You need to check your evals and see how are they performing. If you're dealing with things that are sensitive to biases, then you need to check those biases in those evals.
Yeah. And now, even though you're not working with the kind of in-car experience and like the autonomous driving side of things, I can't talk to you without asking just a little bit about it and getting your view, your opinion on the future of autonomous driving, because there's so much excitement, but also quite a bit of skepticism, right, around the future of autonomous driving. So, and I've seen a lot of talk about getting to level 5, right, where level 5 being the ultimate goal, where these vehicles are basically fully autonomous, right? How, in your view, and kind of the talks that are going on within the company that you might have been close to or heard, how close are we really to level 5 fully autonomous vehicles, do you think?
So I can't really speak to Volvo Cars policy around autonomous driving, and as you know, we're obsessed with safety, so it's always going to be safety first. My general view on the subject is that seems like it's solved. That's my impression. All the reports I hear from the Teslas and the likes, it seems like we're getting less accidents in self-driving cars than we get with human cars. And I think it's more in a regulatory phase. We need to have the frameworks that can assure that this is something that we think is good enough to release on the roads. My personal belief is that we're probably at the point where it's more safe to drive in a self-driving car. Depends on the implementations, but there's this thing. Of course, you get into versions of the trolley problem where it's like you might end up with situations that are caused by the self-driving, and it's going to be probably less than what you get with humans driving the cars. But there's this trade-off, and that's a very uncomfortable space to be in. So I definitely appreciate the complexity of the situation, and making those calls is not easy. But from a technical point of view, I think we're already there.
It's really, really interesting to hear, because I think it's like those points you were just mentioning it's only going to kind of prolong the regulatory side of things, where everything's kind of in place, regulations are in place, and there's no kind of, these challenges are not preventing a kind of full autonomy in that sense. I think I was reading before as well that there was a projection, some publications saying that these level 4 or 5 autonomous vehicles could account for around 20%, I think, of all vehicles sold by 2030. So it seems like quite far away, but still it's only 5 years away.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too, I must say. But are there any other kind of technological, you think we're there technologically, but technologically or regulatory challenges that you think are kind of preventing us today?
Yeah, I think the main thing is to, as I said, this thing about are we willing to accept that we cause accidents by self-driving cars if those accidents are less than with human drivers? And you could turn the question around and say, is it morally a good thing to do to get more accidents because we don't allow self-driving cars?
Yeah.
So
no, exactly.
It's a super tricky space, but
yeah, it's not. Yeah, I see exactly what you mean, but it's kind of it's never really been posed like that, has it?
Yeah, I think in the research world, people think in those terms. But from the technical side, but it is challenging, and as I said, it goes back to the trolley problem. If you have this this car or this train that's going on a circuit, and you can see that somebody will get run over, and then you have the option to steer it into another part of the rail where you would kill less people. It's a super, like, how do you deal with that? You always get back to those kind of problems.
And you don't see yourself any kind of over reliance or this kind of significant reliance on vast amounts of data to train these kind of systems that are used. You don't see any kind of limitations that are moving forward.
There are limitations, of course, because I think Tesla is saying, I think I read that they have the challenge now that the cars are so safe, so they have challenges of getting situations where they can test the safety of the cars, because they're at that point. That's at least what they're communicating. I don't know, but there is a challenge, of course. But it's more around how to deal with it in a human thinking. If you're thinking from a pure technical perspective, it's less problematic, I'd say.
Yeah, and some advice from you for aspiring AI engineers. What do you think AI engineers should focus on to succeed?
I think it's just trying things out. Try to be curious and use all the technology. Don't get pigeonholed into using one thing, but try to do many things and try to think outside the box. You need to interact with other people and find what are other people doing. It's easy to lose track if you're in a small bubble. I mentioned this thing about evaluations, which I think that people, if you start out, then that's something that you might miss. You might develop a system and then you realize, oh, how do I know that if I continue to run this system and I modify it, how do I know that it's still performing? So those kind of things, it's still building up a little bit. So you need to be aware of what people are doing in other places. So be curious and explore. It's also interesting to think about, like, if you're not an AI engineer yet, because most people aren't yet. If you're a software engineer and go into this business, you're already in a good place, I would say, because you know all these things about how do you deal with software, how do you deal with product, all those things. So then it's just like try the APIs and play around with it.
Exactly. So they have a head start, right? But is there any other advice that you'd give to kind of engineers or programmers looking to transition into these AI roles?
Yeah, I think try to see what people are doing. I don't think I have anything else. So try to see what people are doing, explore, and be curious. It's something that's you will be exposed to it at some point. So it doesn't work to not go into it. It's not an option. It's like if you think about before internet, if you were used to working on your own computer and you suddenly the world looks completely different. You now have all these nodes on the internet, and you might need to learn cloud computing. So it's better to get a head start and jumping into this than waiting for it to strike. Because I think people are. For me, it's obvious when being in the field that things are going to change so rapidly, and I think it may seem to people like since ChatGPT launched, not much has happened because it's still a chatbot that you're using in your everyday life, and it maybe doesn't perform all the things that you think it should be able to do, and it hasn't improved so much. But with the new paradigm that was introduced just before Christmas, OpenAI launched the O3 model, and then it was obvious that with the use of reinforcement learning, that's something that can scale to anything where you have verifiably good answers. Then it will scale. So it will happen, and I think people are underestimating how fast it will happen from here
on. And in terms of one of the last questions from me, in terms of transition, like, some people transitioning from these kind of more kind of engineers or programming roles to AI roles. What do you think the kind of skill set of like, let's call it a future developer, software developers, software programmers? I don't know what they're going to be called in the future, but like, how do you see the kind of skill set of this profile in the future compared to today?
Yeah, I think it's evolving. I think we don't know yet. What I see is, as I said, it's easy to get software developers on board. The test-driven development thinking, the long-term thinking of systems. I see it's totally different viewpoints if you go into it from the data science part, where I come from originally, and if you're a software developer. And I think it's even better to be a software developer. So people are scared about coding being superfluous in the future. We don't know, but I think we will just move up the abstraction ladder, and I think software engineers are in a super good place. They just need to start experimenting with the APIs and building stuff as always.
There's lots, with the APIs and so many kind of models out there. It also open sources so much that can be built, right?
Yeah. And it's with the tools that you have now, with working with Cursor, for example, it's anybody can code. My oldest kid is now 17, and he wanted to build an app, and then I just first he started with
get him on Cursor.
Yeah. First he started with Claude, and he was doing all this copying and pasting things. He didn't know what he was doing, but he's learning slowly how to think as a software developer. And when I showed him Cursor, he was like, "This is mind blowing. I've never seen anything."
Talking of hackathons earlier, we had one here before, and a couple of us were using. I know a lot of people were using it, but certainly a couple of people were using Cursor, and were kind of absolutely just amazed at how quickly they could build something. Essentially.
Yeah, I like this vibe coding that was introduced recently on the internet, where you that means to sort of relax from your usual thinking. It's more like go with the flow, just check the output, and then you say whatever you think is missing, and you trust the system to adapt, and you stop looking at your diffs anymore. It's just like some people even connect voice to it, so you just talk to the computer and say what you want it to do. So that's a
nice
fun thing.
Really nice. Really, really nice. And before I wrap up, Jesper, is there anything you want to add? Any advice? Anything else?
I think I already got to my main point. This thing about be prepared, because a lot is gonna happen. I think we're now at the stage. I often think about this thing. You underestimate what's going to happen in 5 years, and you overestimate what's going to happen in 2 years. And if you think about the launch of ChatGPT, it's been 2.5 years, something like that. And we're now at the point where we think that everything should have happened, but the next 2-3 years is where everything is going to happen. So be prepared.
Good advice. And thanks so much for joining us, Jesper. Really, really nice to talk. Really interesting conversation.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Thanks for sharing. We look forward as well to seeing how you continue to drive innovation at Volvo Cars. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow builders. Until next time, keep on building, and we'll see you soon.